the way they treat people and the way they talk to people and the way they go about their business. Get close to those people and really learn from them, and ask questions, ask sensible questions, and it is a really rewarding career.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Student Lawyer podcast series. Whether you're at school, sixth form, university, thinking about a career in law, or exploring law careers, you're in the right place. We are the one-stop shop for student lawyers. If you'd like to join the Student Lawyer as a writer, please email hello@thestudentlawyer.com. This episode is sponsored by the University of Law. The University of Law offers a range of undergraduate and postgraduate courses and master's degrees alongside an award-winning pro bono clinic, so you can build up your legal experience while studying. And their experienced career service will enable you to put your best foot forward when launching your legal career. The courses are employment focused and based on real legal practice, so you'll be better prepared for the workplace. Part-time and online study options are available so you can work and study at the same time. Click the link in the description box of the podcast to find out more about the courses on offer.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Student Lawyer podcast. My name is Stephanie, I'm a current law student, future trainee solicitor and the host of today's episode. Joining me today is William Peake, London-based litigation partner at Harneys, a global offshore law firm. William frequently spends time in Harneys' Cayman Island office and advises banks and investment vehicles and their liquidators, shareholders and directors in relation to disputes. Prior to joining Harneys, William gained broad litigation and insolvency experience at Maples and Calder, predominantly in the Cayman Islands. During the episode, William discusses the benefits of having an offshore practice and the Saad Litigation case, which is the longest and highest value fraud case trial in the Cayman Islands. He also discusses the benefits of having a dual qualification and provides his invaluable advice to all student lawyers. William, welcome to the Student Lawyer. It's great to have you here today.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
I'm very excited to get started with this interview. Got lots of interesting questions for you. We were going to talk about your offshore practice and what it means to be a dual qualified lawyer a little bit later on, but I thought it would be best to start off with asking you a little bit about yourself and your career journey. So I was wondering if you could please introduce yourself, explain what your role as partner entails, and tell us about the type of work that your area of expertise covers.
Sure. There will be a lot of people in Harneys who will be very interested to know what I actually do. So when I'm sketching out what the partner entails they'll be like, yeah, what does this guy do? So I am a litigation partner. I'm based in our London office and I practice Cayman law. That's the only law that I practice. My career journey saw me move to Cayman in 2005. I trained at a firm that was taken over by one of the offshore leading firms, Maples and Calder. I had an opportunity to move to Cayman in 2005, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me. And I ended up doing a 18-month secondment there. I then did a 6-month secondment in the BVI office, and then I ended up moving back to Cayman for nearly, I think, eight years, and it was wonderful for me because I, like every person in their kind of mid 20s, I really wanted to travel, but I wasn't 100% sure how to do it. I was going to think of doing the well-trodden path of having qualified in Dublin. A lot of my friends had moved to London. I love London as a city, but I felt like I wanted to go somewhere a little bit more exotic, but I wasn't too sure where. Then the head of litigation sat me down in the Dublin office and said, would would you like to move to the Cayman Islands? I had heard of it because a very good friend of mine from university, Ben Galili, who's at OGA now, Ben was from Cayman and just to speak about it in wonderful ways. And he's now somebody he's still a very good friend of mine who I spend a lot of time with when I'm over there. So for me, it was an absolute no-brainer.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that, William. I think that having the opportunity to combine travel with work in the early stages of your career as well, it's just, as I said, a really fantastic opportunity. And it's nice to see that, you took it and have taken every opportunity that has come to you and built on that and made a career that you wanted out of life. So congratulations for that.
Well, thank you.
So, why did you choose to become a solicitor and specialise in litigation? And I believe you have a focus on restructuring and insolvency as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, I do. And I actually just realised that I probably didn't deal with the partner entails question of what it is I do on a daily basis. So I blend that into this response. So yeah, I mean, primarily my practice is contentious insolvency. I have been primarily involved in the Saad litigation, and that's taken up a lot of my time. It's still ongoing, so I can't really speak about where the case is at the moment, but I can certainly speak to some of the facts of that later on in the podcast. So what do I do on a daily basis in terms of the partner entails point? I think that for me, I never really saw myself as ever anybody considering me good enough to be a partner of a law firm. And I think that has actually really helped me in how I approach that role. I take it incredibly seriously because I'm sufficiently young, or maybe better way of phrasing it is sufficiently not old enough to forget what it was like to be an associate and to remember the days of partners being there for me and knowing that I had a safety net. And I was really lucky to work with some amazing law firm partners, two that spring to mind, Ben Mays and Matthew Crawford. And Matthew in particular, who's actually now he's a barrister in New Zealand. The patience that man exuded in terms of my career development was incredible. And I think that is something that you remember and that you've got to take forward, that you've got to pay that back to people. And you've got to be there for people. You've got to be accountable. You've got to be visible. And people in the team need to know that the buck stops with you. And I think that, I do remember examples of working with certain partners who took a much more hands-off approach. And that's quite frightening for junior associates. And just because you present well and you're a polished individual, don't mistake that for competence. And I've had some really good conversations with Katie Pearson, who was a former partner of mine, who's actually set up her own law firm, Claritas, in Cayman. And Katie had some really, really interesting insights on competence and confidence, of how I would say I'm quite a confident individual, but I need to be really careful about that because I could almost persuade myself that I'm right because I know I present well. Whereas actually the words that I'm going out with could be complete gobbledygook. And I think you need to really check yourself if you are a really polished performer, and don't let, just because somebody has a meek voice or they don't exude that booming confidence, that means nothing. You've got to imagine that you're reading what they're saying on a transcript, and that's really, really, really important. And I think my approach to partnership is very. I work in teams. I never assume that I'm right, but I know that at the end of the day, I've got to make the big judgment calls, and my team have to see me doing that, because if they don't, they'll lose confidence in me and they won't follow me. And I'm really incredibly lucky to work on the Saad litigation with a massively talented team. And we've got Elaine McGreal, Niall Dodd, and in particular Grania King, who's been with me from the start of that litigation. And Grania gets me out of holes day in, day out. And that is the role of, she's somebody who's clearly going to have a very successful career as a law firm partner. And that is the role. And I think it's really trying to piece your way through. Look at me over here. Aren't I doing amazing stuff? To actually doing the quiet stuff really, really well. And ironically, for somebody who's as verbose as I am, I think the approach I took was trying to do quiet stuff really well, and always trying to help partners. And I think that's something, Grania does incredibly well. And really good examples of, if you typically as the partner on a conference call, you're leading it. Nobody wants to hear from anybody else. And I used to think that being a partner was such an easy job, because I used to think, oh, well, the associates do all the hard work and you're just a mouthpiece when I was an associate. And then I actually, when the seesaw tipped, I was like, wow, actually, this is awful. Everybody's expecting me to know the answers. And especially in this remote world, if I'm on a call and I'm talking or something, you'll constantly getting emails from your team on, don't forget this point, make sure you make this point, and doing it in a really quiet way to make you look good in front of the client. And I remember doing a lot of that back in my day. I'm not that old, but just writing post-its and handing them to partners. And then they would make a paper plane out of them and throw them at me. But those were the things that's where you add value.
I think that you were talking before about the people that you have kind of like looked up to in your career, Ben Mays and Matthew Crawford. It sounds to me like, having a partner that has effectively mentored you and really nurtured you to become, the best associate that you can be is just, it's just totally invaluable to have somebody like that guiding you through the profession, because it's difficult out there, and you do really need somebody kind of like shining a light to help you navigate your way through the profession. I've benefited from mentors in the past, and a lot of them, some of them have acted as perhaps a soundboard and have told me if I'm going along the right way, or if, I'm venturing off, into areas that I don't need to know, or, incorrect. And others that have really showed me the wrong and right thing to say and not to say, and just kind of like acting in many situations. So yeah, I can really see how having a mentor there to nurture you and to mentor you has been beneficial to your career. And you mentioned the partners that were not so hands-on. Me personally, I prefer ones that are hands-on, because it's nice to have them instill that confidence inside of you. But I'm just wondering if having partners there, as I said, that weren't so hands-on, is a bit like throwing you into the deep end and testing your knowledge. To me, it sounds like it would be good to have a mixture of both. Do you agree?
Yeah, I do agree with that. And I think that's the key, is to work with a mix of partners as well, to see the different styles. I don't think sink or swim is the correct approach to the development of a young lawyer for a couple of reasons. Testing whether they have the knowledge. They don't have the knowledge. They're in a frightening, scary law firm environment. It's weird. Law firms are weird. They're full of quite odd people, and it's just an odd environment. I mean, I can still remember the first time I walked into a law firm. I was like, okay, what's going on here? This is all very weird. So you've got to, take that approach, but also for the client, why is the client dealing with somebody in a sink or swim scenario? So that can't be the case. And I think that the best partners are people who, of course, are very hands-on with junior lawyers, and they need to explain to the junior lawyers why are they doing it. I mean, Matthew Crawford, for example, he used to go through about 4 red pens a day marking up my work, but he would explain to me at the end of the day by saying, okay, the reason, it was all kind of in there, but it was completely the wrong order. It was really badly formatted. It was, you've got to be very hands-on, but you then get to a place whereby you're acting like in 10-pin bowling, where they have the 2 things along the side, the guardrails to help you get the ball. That's what the partner's role is, just kind of drifting it towards that position, and you end up having much more. You end up coming to a much better place, I think, if you've that style of management. And a dictatorial style will get you nowhere, because nobody will dig you out of a hole if you're hard to work with, and if you're arrogant, aloof, etc. And those days are gone. I mean, my father ran a law firm, and that was like back in the 60s and the 70s, when it was all pinstripe suits. Everybody's really stuffy. Everybody, it was Mr. Peake, etc. And those days are gone, and you can't get away with that style of management. Nor should you want to get away with that style of management. It's really ineffective.
Yeah, I agree. Before I move on to my next question, I will just say, you were talking about dealing with, or not dealing with, but acting in your team. And it sounded to me like a partner who leads a team needs to be very self-aware. Do you have any tips or tricks as to how to become self-aware when leading a team? And making sure that you have, I suppose, empathy for everybody that's working with you, and then finally come down and a decision.
Yeah, look, that is, if you could bottle self-awareness and sell it, if you could monetize that, you'd be one of the wealthiest people in the world. And that's what we need to do on the Student Lawyer podcast. We need to work out how to monetize that, and then we'll both be billionaires.
Excellent.
But yeah, let's take that up offline. But that's self-awareness. I think you get self-awareness by you've got to listen. You've got to listen. You cannot, and you've got to listen. You've got to recognize body language, and that was one of the real challenges, actually, of the remote world, that you couldn't pick up on that sense of the individual when you were working with them. You couldn't see when you were making a suggestion, and they might think they're doing an eye roll internally, but it's actually just leaked out slightly, and picking up on all of those points. And on the empathy, I will never forget moments in my career as a junior lawyer where I was really, really struggling. And I will never forget the moments where a conversation with a partner made me feel better about myself. And my former managing partner in Maples in Dublin, Andrew Doyle, who was really, really formidable character, somebody I got on with really well, but a formidable guy. But if he gave me a pep talk, I would walk out of that office. I had no idea why there was so much air in my tires. Couldn't really remember what he'd said. And I suspect if I went back into him and said, "What did you just say to me?" he couldn't remember either. But he was brilliant at making you feel like you could walk through walls. And you do need that, because a career in law is tough. There are really big highs, but there are real lows. And you've got to somehow never forget the lows. And I think I sometimes think some partners do. And some partners, some people I've seen in law firms whereby they've spent their whole career trying to become a partner so that they can put the shoe on the other foot, so that they get to take their foot off the gas. They get to tell people what to do. They get to be out at lunchtime when they should be on the tools. And that's a pretty short-sighted career approach. And we spend a lot of time at Harneys. We spend a huge amount of time at Harneys talking about self-awareness and empathy and what does that mean, and just trying to remember what it was like, because I have seen a collective amnesia amongst partners whereby this associate period didn't happen. This period where they were nervously at the door of a partner holding a memo they knew was rubbish and going in to get it marked up. They see a lot of people seem to forget that, and I don't think I ever will. And I think I'm surrounded by enough people who I've got a good enough relationship with. They would tell me if I was, as they say in Northern Ireland, losing the run of myself.
Well, that's very reassuring to know for myself, and I'm sure to the student lawyer listener base who are embarking on a career in law. So why did you choose to become a solicitor specialising in litigation with a focus on restructuring and insolvency?
So I did two. I think I ended up doing 2 litigation seats as part of my training, due to the fact that the litigation department had 2 huge cases going on at the time. I really liked it. It was much more in my wheelhouse in terms of the advocacy, the client facing, the excitement involved in it. And so I had a very kind of broad commercial litigation experience during my training contract. And I think during your training contract, just do everything, make sure you throw yourself into everything. And I remember one of the partners that I sat with, he gave me really good advice. He said, do the small things incredibly well, and then I will trust you to do something slightly bigger next time. And like bigger, because you go into your training contract thinking, I know it all, I've got this, etc. And I think you get slightly frustrated that you're doing such small things, and you're like, oh my God, I'm not doing anything. And remember that those small things, you're a cog in a wheel, and if you're not doing that well, you're making somebody else's life difficult. And you just repeat that small things well mantra, and you will get more responsibility. So a kind of broad commercial litigation practice, then moved to Naples Cayman office, which is a huge funds practice and a huge distressed funds practice, and their entire litigation department was contentious insolvency. I did a couple of very big hedge fund collapses. I did a Dominican Republic bank collapse, and I just find it really interesting. I find it, because the big aspect of a lot of the work that I do is it's got huge conflicts of laws questions, because there's such a jurisdictional tapestry in terms of where is involved. And if you're doing a hedge fund collapse, the constituent elements of that structure will be based all over the world. So, you might be in New York, you might be in Cayman, you might be in Switzerland. I did actually a big collapse of a bank in Portugal, which was really interesting in terms of it was the Portuguese Cayman subsidiary that went into liquidation, and then we had to arrive over to Lisbon. So I was going back and forth with Simon Conway, who's a partner in PwC in Cayman there, and yeah, it's really good fun, you know. And I was like, you know, I think I'm slightly more. I think I like travel a little bit less now, so because I do an awful lot of it, so the kind of glamour has slightly come on. You can only take so many Ryanair flights, but I did love that when I was in my kind of mid to late 20s of getting that opportunity to do things like that. I absolutely loved it, and yeah, I just find the work really, really, really interesting. And you know, in the same way, but it's really interesting if you chat to a transactional lawyer, they find what litigators do really boring and too kind of haphazard and no consistency, whereas I find what the work that they do, oh my God, I'd need a little bit more volatility in what I was doing. But at the same time, the interesting thing about offshore, and I'm sure we'll come on to this, is that I think as a contentious insolvency lawyer, you end up becoming a reasonably decent transactional lawyer. I wouldn't put it any higher than that in case my transactional partners disabuse you of that statement. But because you spend so much time reviewing the constitutional documents, the articles, the memo and arts, you know, the offering memorandums, and all of the architecture around the funds and the corporate structures, you actually end up knowing quite a lot about that, and you feel really equipped to deal with it. And in the same way that, you know, some of my transactional colleagues, they know litigation inside out because they've been in the belly of the beast as well. And that's one of the great things about offshore, is that you end up not being pigeonholed into, you know, very, very tight specific departments. And I much prefer that, because I kind of like not knowing exactly what's on my desk each day. Yeah. You know, because I think if I was doing the same stuff every day, I'd get quite bored.
This is it. It sounds like variety in a day is definitely kind of like crucial to keep you ticking along and keeping things exciting, and especially somebody like yourself who likes that travel and I suppose that jet setting kind of career and lifestyle perhaps. But just whilst you were talking about the whole litigation practice area, it is something that I've been told anyway previously, that all trainees would benefit from doing a seat in litigation, as I'm going to quote a partner in a financial practice area at a law firm that I've spoken to once before. People in litigation just come up with solutions to problems that people in other practice areas just, you know, wouldn't generally think of. So they're just fantastic. I don't really like to use the word problem solve. I like solution finder. But
yeah.
Apparently their minds just work in incredible ways. So it is very appealing to do a seat in litigation, just, you know, to really kind of like push your limits and expand your mind. And when you were talking about starting off with small tasks, I can really see how that would work as well. I've just come out of a summer internship where I was in an environment that I hadn't worked in before. But a lot of the work I had was admin based and a lot of uploading and copying and pasting. So these were quite small tasks, but if I had done them incorrectly, then the company would either not get paid or their customers would lose out on products. So although it was a small task in the in the sense that it was, quite repetitive and not really that mentally challenging. What I got from that was, I needed to have fantastic attention to detail and focus that, was not just great focus as well, because if I got distracted and I didn't do all these uploads correctly, as I said, it would have really impacted the business. So starting small but doing these small tasks efficiently, I think, is very important. So I really do agree with everything that you have just said.
Great.
So I was just wondering if you could perhaps explain the reason that you took your career from Dublin to Cayman and the BVI and then back to London.
So basically, for me, I was lucky that I had a kind of try before you buy. I was able to do a secondment and get a real flavour for Cayman and BVI and that lifestyle. And I instantly fell in love with it. Being Irish, I'm not used to seeing the sun, so that was a lovely novelty, and it really appealed to me, the kind of outdoor of being able to spend a lot of time outdoor, and it was great. And also you have the proximity to the States. I absolutely love the States. I lived there for a while when I was younger, during kind of years in university. Love New York, love Miami. So I could go there an awful lot, and I would be up in New York every kind of 6 weeks. I'd be up in Miami every month, and that was good for fueling my sneaker addiction. I would spend a lot of time in New York buying sneakers that I didn't need. But that's for another podcast. And then I'd basically been there in total about 10 years, I think. And I always wanted to live in London. And I felt like I wanted to take some time out from law to basically, I had an opportunity I kind of saved enough money to take a year out. I wanted actually to do some stand-up comedy and to do some comedy writing for some friends of mine. So I basically took a year out and did that, knowing that I would eventually get back into law. And I wasn't exactly selling out the O2, so I decided to go back to dip my toe in the legal market. Sat down. I'd always had this idea that why did we not have a Cayman litigator in London? Because a lot of my clients and the firm's clients that I was at previously were in London. And I was like, if I'm able to get in a taxi and go round to these offices and sit in with them when they phone, is that not a no-brainer? And also that we're 4 hours ahead. The person in London is not waiting for the lawyer in Cayman to wake up. So I was like, so it's 5-6 hours behind, depending on where it is in the year. But it just felt like you had from 9 to 1 o'clock every day of this vast oasis of clients. And so sat down with a couple of firms, instantly liked what Harneys had to say, had a really good kind of instant rapport with Phil Kite, who's the global head of litigation at Harneys. And he was like, yeah, I agree with you. This is what I'm trying to do on the BVI side. So I had the other half of Phil's amulet. And then we basically developed the Harneys London kind of litigation presence, and it's been a real success. And I've been lucky that because my practice is Cayman, Harneys is I joined Harneys as a senior associate, and it was completely devoted to the principle of I need to go back to Cayman regularly to have any credibility in the London market. And I think the other point that I cottoned on to quite quickly was in London, I wasn't marketing Harneys, I was marketing offshore jurisdictions. And that was once that penny dropped for me, I kind of, it unlocked a huge amount of work, because what I was actually doing was dispelling a cynicism about offshore to people who didn't understand it, and explaining to them the infrastructure of the court system, the financial services division. The Court of Appeal is ex-English Court of Appeal judges. This is a really, really familiar system with high quality legal practitioners, high quality insolvency practitioners. And this is, London in the sun. And once I cracked that formula, we really started to win a huge amount of work. I think you need to be a very particular type of individual in London to make an offshore litigation practice work, because I think you need to be prepared to be out and about a lot, meeting clients, really jumping on things incredibly quickly, because I take the view that if they phone me and I don't answer, or they email me and I don't answer, they're just going to go next on the Rolodex and find the next person that they know. So just building up those relationships. And my approach to kind of business development is rather than try and have 100 clients, I've got a set of maybe 10, 15 who I just focus on, and I also kind of naturally drift towards people who I've things in common with, and so it's a bit more. It's more fun than a job, because I couldn't spend a lot of time with people who I've got nothing in common with. That would kill me.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So what do you think the key benefits are of working in multiple international locations?
So I think, look, that's a really good question. That is, why move offshore? I think that you get exposure to people who have very common values to you, the people who have moved offshore for a reason. Typically, any law firm will be built up of ex-Magic Circle lawyers or equivalents from New Zealand, Australia, etc. So you're dealing with really bright, crackling intellects. So that's great. It's superb that this is the environment that you're working in. Your client base is all blue chip clients. It's all high-end financial institutions, the quality IP shops, and you definitely get that. You definitely get that work-life balance, and that's the point that everybody who has moved offshore will say to you. And it was really well described to me by somebody who said, "Why would you not move offshore? If you move to, say, Cayman, every weekend is a holiday in the Caribbean." And that is once you kind of, that clicks, you're like, yeah, this is a no-brainer. And I do think, and my brother's, my younger brother's a lawyer, and he didn't move offshore, and he was at one of the big city firms. He's now in-house at news media, but I did just to say to him, I was like, I don't know why you don't just do this for 2 years. It's a no-brainer. And, he was in a relationship that, subsequently got married, etc. But his wife's a lawyer as well. And I was like, you guys would have been living the dream, because you've got 2 lawyers' salaries offshore. And I think that I would say to anybody, 2 years, because everybody moves, maybe not everybody, but the vast majority of people say, I'm going to go offshore for 2 years. And they either do that or they stay. And very few people go, I'm moving offshore forever. Everybody just wants to live that kind of lifestyle and see what it's like. And it's a pretty intoxicating lifestyle, because, for me, it was, I love running. So I could run all the time and it wasn't in the rain. And I could travel a lot. I could go to New York, I could go to Miami. So and your CV also looks really interesting. Certainly for a litigator. I think for a litigator, it's a complete no-brainer because you have access to work that you wouldn't get in the city in terms of what you're doing at that level. And you have, for me, it was a big decision whether I become a barrister or I become a solicitor. I became a solicitor, then moved offshore, became an attorney, fused profession. I was doing everything that I wanted. I could get as much advocacy as I wanted. I had all the client-facing work as well. And also we were getting bills were getting paid as well because of your client base. So yeah, there's an awful lot to be said for it, to be honest.
Well, do you know what? As somebody that hasn't had a sunny holiday since 2019, I can safely say that I would say I'd move to the Cayman Islands, forevermore. So I'll be that person. So I think it's probably a good time to move into the offshore practice area of the podcast. So I'd love to start off by asking you what the benefits are of having an offshore practice and how it can complement a lawyer that has a predominant onshore practice.
Yeah, so I think that it allows you to see things through both ends of the telescope. And I think that if you go offshore and then return onshore, you will find that you naturally gravitate towards that work. And a really good example of that is Barnaby Stook, who I used to share an office with in Maples. Barnaby was in Cayman for, I think, maybe 2 years, maybe 2.5 years. And he returned to London with Jones Day. He's now a partner there, and his practice has a real offshore element to it. Barnaby and I are, very good friends, first and foremost, but we also work together on a lot of things. And he sees the issues on cases quicker than the most onshore lawyers, and he's a joy to work with because of that. And he has also developed a massively successful practice as a result of having those elements to it. He's a really good example of somebody who, when he was in Cayman, was probably doing the work of a junior partner when he was 3-4 years qualified, simply because he's staggeringly bright and can take on all of this work. But he had that environment where people trusted him, and he's working in teams with partners, etc. But he was really driving it forward himself. So I think it does give you that. It allows you to peer around the corner and see things a little bit more quickly than others.
That's really good to know. Thank you for sharing that. You've touched upon the Saad litigation case a little bit in this episode already. So I was wondering if you could please tell us the facts of the case. What is in dispute, you said, is still going on, and what your involvement is in the case and the outcome that it's had so far.
Sure. So the Saad litigation has been running since 2009. It relates to a series of events throughout the 90s and the 2000s. It's a complex cross-border fraud case that you name a jurisdiction and it has tentacles into it. It turns on the facts of a Kuwaiti fighter pilot, Man al-Sanea, who became a financier. He was in the Forbes top 100 list, and his dispute with his in-laws, essentially the Al-Ghassabi family. The whole case turns on two concepts: knowledge and authority of borrowing between those individuals. It was the longest running case in the Commonwealth, longest running trial. Sorry, it took 13 months to be heard. It was the longest running appeal in the Commonwealth as well. It took nearly 6 weeks to be heard. the courtroom every day would have 50, 60 people in it. It was a hugely interesting case to be involved with. We've just received the Court of Appeal judgment, which largely upheld everything from the Court of First Instance. And it was fantastic. I mean, we acted for the joint official liquidators, Nick Matthews and Mark Longbottom at the time, who's been replaced by Mitch Mansfield. And Nick is based in London. And this was, Stephanie, you couldn't have made up a better case for Harneys to show off its London litigation practice, because
fantastic.
Yeah, it was fantastic because Nick is an incredibly smart, easy to deal with client. He's based in London, so he was in my time zone. So we got into this incredible rhythm of, we would work on documents in the morning, documents would go out to the Cayman office, and then they would turn around the documents, flip them over to us in the morning. And we did a huge amount of travel off the back of that case. We were in Cayman back and forth for nearly four years. And my living room was just a collection of suitcases from going here, there, and everywhere. We spent quite a bit of time in the Middle East. The Al Ghassabi family are based in Al Kabar, which is the capital of the Eastern Province. And it was a really, really good fun case to be involved with. We were led by Tom Lowe, QC of Wilberforce Chambers. And it was really good fun. I will never be involved in a case like it again. And I have never eaten as many falafel wraps, which was our lunch, every day for 13. I had a lot of falafel wraps. And really good fun. And it's still going. And it gave me really good exposure to so many firms. And it also kind of taught me, because one lesson that you definitely learn as a litigator is that your inverted commas opponent could also be a really great source of work, in terms of if you have a good relationship with that individual, because you don't have any animus towards the individual running the other case. Some people let litigation get so personal. Maybe I need to get a little bit more like that, but I just don't. I'm like, well, I mean, the person sent the letter because they were instructed to send the letter. It's not their fault. And, I've developed some really good relationships on cases with the other side. And it's really important to remember that. I think that every opportunity, or every piece of work you do, is an opportunity to impress somebody. And I was opposite Sarah Walker at King and Spalding quite early in my career in Harneys, and Sarah's turned out to be a good friend of mine, and somebody who we refer work to each other. But that started in a really angst-ridden piece of litigation where everybody didn't like everybody, and Sarah and I were able to kind of cut through that by just being normal. Never underestimate the power of being normal in the world of law. It goes a very long way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So if anybody takes nothing else out of this, be normal.
Of course, as well, and always be polite and have manners, because you might be up against a solicitor in one case, but the next matter you get in, you could be working together if multiple law firms are working on that piece. So that totally, I think, is very important to remember. There's no need to, I suppose, take things personally. We're all on the same team at the end of the day.
I'd like to take a moment to speak about the University of Law, which is the university I decided to study my LPC at. The University of Law is the sponsor of this podcast and makes it possible for us to continue bringing these episodes to you. So we really appreciate you supporting us by supporting our sponsors. What really sets the University of Law apart from other universities is its belief in training students for the real world from the moment they accept a place. The University of Law's experienced career service and award-winning pro bono clinics offer students the chance to get real-life legal experience which can boost employability. They offer a range of undergraduate and postgraduate legal training and master's degrees designed by qualified experts to help students excel at any stage of their career. Their courses are employment-focused, honing key skills in a teaching environment based on real legal practice. Part-time and online study options are also available on many of their courses to help students work and study at the same time. If you'd like to find out more about the courses on offer, please click the link in the description box of the podcast.
So you mentioned that the case was very complex and was what a lot of jurisdictions are involved in it. Is that the reason why it went on for so long?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It went on for so long because the scope of the period of time where we say the fraud was being perpetrated was so long. All of the documents were in Arabic, so there was a huge translation exercise to take place. The filing system of the family, because this was all 70s, 80s. This is all paper files, and it's really, really document intensive. The issues were complex when you first looked at them, but if you drilled down on it, it all turned on knowledge and authority, and the money flows were disparate. So trying to follow the money was quite tricky, and you're also dealing with a huge amount of personalities. You're dealing with a huge amount of liquidators, different approaches. Some people have a common interest, some don't. And what you find about if you create a common interest with a certain set of parties, you'll find that it's common until it's not, and then it's suddenly the wheels fall off quite quickly. And trying to get, I can still see, walls of paper files for that case. And we had an electronic trial bundle, but some of the silks wanted paper copies. Even, the exercise of uploading all the documents to Magnum Opus was crazy. And it actually goes back to, because when you were saying about your summer internship and doing the small things well, there's a brilliant example of if you refer to a bundled reference in a hearing and the document that you refer to doesn't show up on the screen, wheels off. And you can be damn sure that everybody is staring at the most junior solicitor in that team. And it's really interesting that I was involved in a lot of bundle reference exercises as a trainee and as a junior lawyer, and I really didn't think it was important because I was like, oh yeah, look at this rubbish. And then I remember I screwed up a bundle reference and I got an absolute rollicking for it, and rightly so, because I completely screwed up. And I was damn sure that I didn't make that mistake again, because suddenly the whole world feels like there's just like a million spotlights on you. It's not very pleasant.
Yeah, something that's mentioned in almost every podcast episode, a piece of advice is do everything 110%, because you may not think that somebody is watching, or you may not think it matters, but it really does. and you don't want to build a bad reputation for yourself just simply because at that moment in time you didn't think that this small task was important. I think that reputation goes a very long way, and it only takes just one person who you don't usually work with to see your not so top quality piece of work for them to then think that that's how you act on a regular basis.
Totally.
Just always showing up and being the best version of yourself, I think, is very important. So thank you very much for sending that message. And as we're on, I suppose, the subject of trainees, what tasks do trainees generally have in long-running trials and high-value cases like the Saad litigation case?
So there's very much a huge amount of trust in terms of document preparation, in terms of privilege checks, but there's also a huge amount of discrete research tasks, because that's the great thing about a case like that, is that you're spinning off so many esoteric research tasks, and that's good fun. That's really good fun, because you're actually not just stuck in a sea of documents. You're taking time out to do something interesting, and that's a really big role of the partner in litigation like that. I mean, I think when we were full steam ahead on discovery, I think we had a team of maybe 10, 12, 15 working on it, and I was really hyper vigilant to ensure that you have a couple of frankly boring document review days, but then you would come out of that and do something interesting. And also, because you're on conference calls 24/7 with the client, that everybody is on those conference calls, because that's the interesting bit, and that's where you learn judgment, and you see the instincts of more senior people, and everybody's career will stall if they can't demonstrate good judgment, because frankly, everybody coming out of a big city firm, etc., or anybody qualifying as a solicitor or a barrister is clearly smart. They can do document review, they can prepare legal memos, they can structure an email, etc., etc. So that's fine, and you've got to learn all of those skills. But you get to the point in your career where 7, 8, 9 years qualified, and you're thinking, right, well, when do I kick on here to become a partner? You'll only be identified for that by demonstrating good judgment, and you have an opportunity to demonstrate that when you're in conversations in the team meeting and you're raising points of, maybe you're talking about a document, and as a senior associate or counsel level, you look at it and the partner, he or she says, well, okay, I think that's that. And you say, well, hold on, I think there is another complexion to this document. And I think we need to pause, and we need to look at this language, and we need to, and that's when people go, okay, Brett, I didn't see that. I didn't see that. And I'm talking about things like, well, hold on a second, I send a lot of draft, with the time zone. If I draft an email as the partner, I send it back to the team and say, any comments, which is slightly unusual because it's usually, the associate maybe drafting it. Sometimes I'll do it because I've had the conversation with the person, or I know what needs to go into it. And if somebody comes back with a comment where they're saying, yeah, I wouldn't say that because that will light that fuse. And then I'm like, oh, great. Brilliant. I didn't see that. You've demonstrated good judgment. That's impressive. And I think that goes as well to learning a management kind of style or a leadership style that works for you. I think that you can, and it's really interesting, when people say, well, I can't learn a good management style because I'm working with really bad managers. I've worked really bad. I worked with partners that I didn't like, but I learned from that because I was like, I'm never doing that. I'm never going to say those things, and I'm never going to take that approach, and I'm never going to be passive aggressive, because there must be a handbook somewhere that teaches partners how to be passive aggressive, and I never got it. But passive aggression is the most toxic form of communicating, in my view. I'd much rather somebody is really kind of formidably angry, or obviously annoyed. I cannot deal with passive aggression. And if I see communications from somebody more senior with a lot of the question mark is the most offensive punctuation sometimes. And why didn't we do this? Question mark. Did we think about this? Question mark. Stop. Now is not the time to perform a black box analysis of how we're in this situation. Now is the time to work out how we get out of it. Absolutely. There will come a point where we look in the rear view mirror and we learn from how we got to there. But if anybody comes to you with a problem as a partner, they've clearly thought long and hard about raising it with you. So they've got to that point where I've got to do this. There's been the kind of gulp before they walk into your office. They do not want you to point out the problems that they know. They're very well aware of those problems. What they do want is to draw on your experience and your expertise and your miles on the clock to say, this is not as bad as you think it is. This is not as bad as you think it is. Here is the way out. And that's, again, kind of goes to, that's how people follow you. And that's how people trust you, and how a team really kind of calcifies as a unit. Because that's the thing about litigation, these long running kind of big complex cases, you're working with the same people all the time, and so you've got to trust each other, and they've got to trust you, and it's all very mutual.
Absolutely. I think that it's really important to work for future trainees and current trainees to remember that the law firms have hired you because they want you, to bring your creativity and challenge the norm that has been set. They have accepted you into the law firm, so they want your opinion. And I think it's really important to remember what with so many people suffering from this imposter syndrome. So it's really good to hear that creativity and individuals' judgment is really wanted, and partners do want to be I don't know if challenged is the right word, but they certainly want to hear different solutions perhaps to the ones that they have come up with or already spotted.
Yeah, totally. And there's, again, that just goes to judgment as to when do you raise those points. And never I always just think of it that I have a couple of coupons that I can redeem in terms of stupid questions to the partner. And I'm going to try and use those really preciously. And if the answer is apparent from speaking to, the other thing is, you'll find in a law firm, the most senior secretary is usually the best place to start.
Right.
They are usually, they've seen it, they've done it, and they know whether it ends well or it ends badly. And so that's there's other places to start usually than the partner. But partners need the perspective. They need different perspectives because they've usually done things the same way for a long time. And as you say, you kind of need to disrupt that logic. Also because people are coming out of law school, they know so much. They have so much more contemporary knowledge than that partner has. So yeah, don't be scared to flex your muscles there.
Do you ever see people being being slightly confused by wanting to contribute creative and unusual solutions to speaking just for the sake of it, to be loud and to be heard. Do you think that the loud people are doing it with, or mostly doing it with, well, I suppose, where am I going to with this question? Is there a big difference between somebody being loud for the sake of it and giving creative solutions? I suppose there is, but what's your experience with that?
Definitely is. And I think it goes back to that competence point, that it is the role of the partner to filter out the delivery and sift through that rubble for the gold. And everybody needs to find their kind of line and length as a junior lawyer. And I was somebody who, I think because it kind of goes to self-awareness, I'm really self-aware that I'm a talker and that I've always got an idea or something. And I suppose verbally, I kind of had to sit on my hands, and that helped. But what I used to do was I used to kind of pick it up afterwards with the partner, where, you know, if I was in a big team meeting or something, and I would say I had an idea, but I didn't know if it was a good one. And I go, right, okay, discretion is the better part of valor. I won't bring that up. But then I would raise it separately with the partner or maybe the senior associate and say, what about this? And they might say, oh yeah, that is a good point. Or no, that doesn't work because. So you've got to get that right. And again, that goes to judgment. But I think you've also got to trust that the partner can filter out the noise. But the competence point is, I have been in meetings where I have seen somebody deliver an incredibly good point very, very badly. And I've seen somebody deliver a really duff point incredibly well. And 9 times out of 10, you will see people drifting towards the better presentation point. And you've got to be so careful because as a partner, you are, I suppose you're kind of like an editor of everything that's in the room, and you've got to try and take all that in. You've got to discount it. And that also goes to knowing your team inside out, you know, having those coffees, those one-on-ones with junior lawyers to get a sense of that person. And then there's other people some people are brilliant at this, that when they speak, you instinctively pick up the pen because you're like, well, this person talks so rarely. Yeah. And when they do, it's a belter point. And so, I mean, I do think the irony of me saying this, you know, sometimes less is more on that. But again, it's all relationship building. It's all building up that rapport with the partner. How do you get there? You get there by doing those small tasks well, building that foundation of trust, and then your voice cuts through the melee a lot quicker.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for sharing that. So moving now on to our discussion about dual qualification. So what are the key benefits of being a dual qualified lawyer, would you say?
So I'm qualified in Ireland, England, Cayman and BVI. So I only practice Cayman law now, and there's the advantage of understanding different jurisdictions and seeing how they approach issues. I think in terms of, there's almost a kind of dual qualification aspect as well in terms of the branches of the profession, that in Cayman you are an attorney, so you are practicing as a junior junior barrister, and you're also practicing as a solicitor. And for me, that was a huge help in kickstarting my career. I think as an Irish if I had stayed as an Irish solicitor, I would not have had, I would never have drafted legal submissions. I would never have done anything weighty in court. Now that may have changed because I stopped practicing there in 2005, but my understanding is it hasn't really changed.
Yeah.
Sorry, excuse me. And so I love that exposure to different, getting the best of both worlds out of the bar and being a solicitor.
Excellent. So just to, I suppose, clarify, you say doing the work of a solicitor and barrister, the two are infused, if you like. It's not carrying out, the solicitor's work separately and then passing it along to yourself later on to do the barrister work. It's infused. You take both practices and they're combined.
Exactly. So you've kind of got, it's very akin to the the US process whereby you've kind of got the oddity of you will have if you're say doing like a sanction application where you're asking the court to say that the liquidators can take a certain step or can dispose of assets, for example, in the liquidation. There is in the conventional solicitor barrister dynamic, the solicitor will be dealing with the insolvency practitioner there and will be acting as a conduit between the client and counsel and refracting the instructions, etc. And whereas there's one person in court in Cayman, and that's you. You're dealing with the client, and you're dealing with you're dealing with the judges. I think it probably works. It works so effectively in Cayman because your client base is so sophisticated. I mean, you're dealing with uber bright IPs who are they're an awful lot smarter than me, and so that's why it kind of works quite well, I suppose, to kind of much more kind of conventional model in the UK. But it just makes you a much for me personally, it made me a much sharper and accountable lawyer because I wasn't kind of hospital passing stuff to counsel, because the reality was I would be the one making the submissions in court. So I needed to really deal with the gnarly issues rather than hand them on to counsel.
Excellent. I think that whilst law students are at university and have decided on which profession they want to take in life, so many people get asked, what route are you going to take, the barrister route or the solicitor route? So it's really nice to hear that you can have both if you want. And you're, of course, a prime example of that. So you're a commercial litigator that, touches upon different practice areas to keep your practice, fun and exciting, and have a dual qualification. Can other solicitors benefit? Well, can other solicitors who aren't, I suppose, commercial solicitors also benefit from having a dual qualification? I'm thinking perhaps, like criminal barristers or criminal solicitors or civil solicitors.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, obviously the situation with the criminal bar at the moment is, it's a remarkable state of affairs when you see how little they are actually paid and, the approach of the government to that. And, I've spoken to quite a few friends of mine who are at the criminal bar, and I just, nothing but sympathy for them, and they have my complete support. But it's interesting that there's actually quite a few people who move from the criminal bar to offshore because they're doing a lot of white collar crime work. And a really good example of that is, the managing partner of our Cayman office, Nick Hoffman, who was at the bar in London for 10 years. He had a very heavy criminal side to his practice, and he has completely moved into high profile commercial litigation. But it's really interesting. He's a very good friend of mine and incredibly close colleague, but his instincts on certain things are so much sharper than mine. And he thinks about things in a really different way. And probably, and in the same way, he knows that I think about things in a different way. So we get to really good spaces. And that's why I really like offshore, because it tends to attract disparate elements of the legal profession, which makes sure that you're never working in an echo chamber. And the most toxic trait to any business is an echo chamber, because if you are sitting in a non-diverse room, and I mean, diversity in every sense of the word, in terms of, ethnicity, in terms of sex, in terms of where you come from in the legal profession, you'll end up with the same answers. And that's rubbish. That's really boring, and it's not innovative, and it's not entrepreneurial. So you need to be, and it's interesting, when you refer to the word kind of challenge, challenging a partner, I think your partners are constantly challenging partners, and that's where you create the result for the client. Because at the end of the day, you've got to keep bear in mind, why are we all doing this? We're all doing this because somebody is handing over an awful lot of money to Harneys to produce a solution, in your words. And that's you've got to remember that at all times. This isn't some vanity project whereby you're trying to be the smartest person in the room. You're trying to come up with the most cost-effective solution for an individual or a group or a company that desperately needs your help. And you've got to remind yourself of that at all times, because I do think lawyers, hardly hold the front page news, but they can absolutely get lost in a morass of detail, whereas there's often a Gordian knot solution that is cost effective and the best thing for the client.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for sharing that. So how do you think that, in your opinion, should student lawyers decide on which jurisdiction to gain a dual qualification?
I think that I think you should expose yourself to as many aspects of the law as possible during your time in university. I think you should try and spend time in chambers, which I know you've done at Radcliffe Chambers. You should try and spend time in a law firm, and it's very much just detecting the rhythm of places and where do you feel most comfortable in, and also not just a law firm. Try and get into different sizes of law firms, because law firms are not a one size fits all solution, and you may feel better equipped in a much smaller firm. In a regional practice might appeal to you. Try absolutely everything, and you play around with stuff, try and break it, find out what actually works for you, because I absolutely appreciate that I was incredibly lucky with some of my career breaks. I tended to be in the right place at the right time, and I don't think that's very good advice for people, because that's serendipity as opposed to a structured career plan. But looking back now, if I could change one thing, I would have exposed myself to a lot more different environments. Fortunately, I ended up in the one where I know I'm most comfortable, but that was by happenstance. And there have been friends of mine who have, they've qualified as barristers, they've become solicitors, they've gone back again, they've gone in-house, they've gone into industry, they've set up their own businesses, they've tried so many different things to try and get. Now, most of them, now or where they want to be, but they all went through these kind of arresting gear changes to get to where they needed to be. And I think all of them would say, jeepers, I wish I'd actually done a little bit more trying. And because there are so many, good friend of mine, Fergus Wheeler, who's a partner in White and Case, and he would say, and he trained at big Irish firms, Freshfields, etc., and he would say it's amazing what's available to junior lawyers now and aspiring solicitors. God, I wish that that was probably there when we were there, but we were so rubbish at finding it. And you're a brilliant example of it. Like, you're clearly exposing yourself to so many aspects of the law and meeting so many different people via this podcast. And some people will say things to you that really click with you. Some people, you will say, jeepers, I definitely don't want to be going down that avenue. And that's brilliant. So, I really, I'm pretty jealous of how you're doing all the things I probably should have done.
Well, do you know what? I'm very envious of everything that you have done. And yeah, you are right. Well, thank you very much, first of all, for the very kind words. It means a lot. But yeah, I mean, just hearing people's experiences, how they've navigated through difficult situations, the opportunities that they've taken and what it has led to, it really does open up your eyes to understand what is available out there for you. And sometimes, even if that opportunity isn't available at this time, I can see how you can make opportunities for yourself. If you make right judgments, as we've been talking about, and just being confident in your decisions. So yeah, I mean, speaking to people who have experience in a whole array of careers in this profession really does help. And I think that back in the day, it was more difficult to find out experiences that other people have had and get them for yourself. But today, what with these virtual internships, LinkedIn, I mean, I just love reading articles on LinkedIn, on the newspaper, seeing a lawyer has commented or even written this article, and then approaching them on LinkedIn to say, I loved your article, I want to ask you a question off of it. So there's just very easy ways to communicate with people and to build your knowledge, like to become commercially aware, I suppose. So I think it's just not being afraid to reach out to people, I find. But I suppose, a people person, and I love to build relationships and you speak to people. So it kind of comes easy to me. I mean, it's just something that I have always really liked to do. But yeah, the opportunities are out there for people to make these relationships and find out about the experiences and reach out to people on LinkedIn, I suppose, to ask them about the jurisdiction that they work in. I think that's a great way to learn about it.
Yeah, totally agree.
So, William, for the student lawyers who are interested in embarking on a career at Harneys, what career opportunities are available for students and graduates?
Yeah, so, I mean, the reality is that if we are not looking after that group of people, they will never want to join a firm like Harneys. So at the moment, we have on our website, we've got a careers page. In the London office, we do bespoke internships upon application. We try to give people a kind of broad diet of what our practices are. We also have a very vibrant internship program in our Cayman office. So if your listenership extends to the Caribbean, Stephanie, they should all apply. We also have we sponsor individuals as well in Cayman and BVI take care of their costs for university and take care of their training costs as well. And we have a article clerk program, which is the equivalent of trainee solicitors in our Cayman and in our BVI office. Our BVI office is, it's the second biggest employer on island behind the government. So we see our roles in those communities as very much, it's a really important one, and we take it very, very seriously. And we see how we are a cog in the wheel of that society, and because it's just so much smaller than London, and these islands, people know everybody. I mean, it takes you a couple of weeks, and then you actually you know absolutely everybody. It's quite funny actually when you kind of try and get your head around it. So so it's something we take very seriously.
Well, it sounds like you have got absolutely excellent initiatives at Harneys, and I'm going to put a link in the show notes to the website page that you were talking about.
Great.
So our listeners in London, and I do think that we have some international listeners. So if anybody listening is in the Cayman Islands, definitely look Harneys up, and yes, those spots at the Cayman Island office. I am very jealous of you if you get the position. So I know that we've spoken about a number of skill sets that trainee lawyers and associates and even partners should have. Empathy sounding like it's the key one or main. But if there are, say, 3 top qualities that you believe a trainee solicitor should have, what would those 3 be?
So I think listening is really important, to really understand what is being asked of you. You really get one good opportunity to ask all the annoying questions about what the task is. Do not stand up from that chair and walk out of the office without knowing specifically what is being asked of you, because you will find that a lot of people providing those instructions, they don't know themselves what they're actually asking for. And you've got to really drill down on that. So listen and ask at the initial conversation stage. Then I think just immense attention to detail. If you prepare a document and say there's a typo in the first sentence, in the first paragraph, the reader is immediately reaching for his or her red pen. And that just makes the rest of the kind of cascade down. They're looking at it through a different lens because they think that the individual doesn't care about the document, hasn't really pored over it properly. And my third point is, if you are working with somebody new for the first time, and this is an extension of point 2, hit it out of the park. Give that person every assistance. And if that's little things go an awful long way in terms of if you're referring to a couple of cases in a note, make sure those cases are attached to the email. If you're sitting down in person with with the individual, maybe have the cases printed off, have the relevant sections highlighted and tabbed. Make everything as easy as possible for that individual, because if you become a crutch for that person, you'll just get work. Because one of the key complaints that trainees and article clerks always have is that, are we getting enough work? And that's because you will find certain trainees are extremely busy and some aren't, and that's an indictment of the employer, because everybody has to be busy at all times. But the ebb and flow of an office, some people get more work than others, and that is because they have hit it out of the park when they first had that task. Because you only, it's like a Hallmark card, but you only get one chance to make a first impression. So make it a good one.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And it kind of links back to what we were talking about earlier about building a good reputation for yourself, because it really does last. So as we're approaching application season and student lawyers will be sitting interviews at law firms and chambers, I'm sure that many of them at this time are going to be wanting to improve their commercial awareness. So at their interviews, they can talk to their interviewers with ease about commercial and legal issues. In your opinion, how can student lawyers increase or develop even their commercial awareness?
So, I mean, the way I think developing commercial awareness isn't a unique requirement for student lawyers. It's something that if you are in the financial services industry, you've got to have your finger on the pulse. The way I do it is I listen to the AFT briefing podcast every day. It's like a 10-minute, 15-minute soundbite, but it lets me know and it lets me think about an issue in a roundabout way. I also listen to The Daily on the New York Times, which is a fantastic podcast, which is another half an hour kind of soundbite of US politics. And I think you cannot underestimate the power of reading, getting the FT Weekend. The FT Weekend is a superb paper, but it's also a lot less financial heavy than its version during the week. But the companies and markets page just behind the letters pages are just full of gold. They condense the entire week's stories and pick up on them. And those are the points that you need to be aware of and discussing. And you need to be smart in the applications. You need to, if you're applying to a firm that you know is involved in a certain piece of litigation or a certain sector, you need to, if you have the opportunity of an interview, you need to not glaringly bring that up like a robot and say, I know you are involved in X. You need to drift the conversation towards that and say, oh, actually, I read a really interesting piece recently in The Economist, in the New York Times, in the FT, which referred to X. And if the firm that you're speaking to will boast immediately, they will say, "Oh, actually, we're involved in that." No, really, are you? Boom, you're away with a conversation. If you're in the interview process, the firm's profiles reveal so much about the lawyers. LinkedIn will reveal so much about the lawyers. And I had a really interesting one recently whereby you will find as well during the interview. I do a lot of interviews for Harneys, and the dynamic has completely changed, Stephanie, that it's more they're interviewing me about Harneys than I'm interviewing them about themselves, because it's a really, it's a really employee-driven market right now. And I had a very interesting one where this girl immediately started talking about things that resonated with me. And then I was kind of going, what is going on here? And she'd clearly gone through my LinkedIn profile and looked at all the stuff that I had kind of liked or had reposted, and in a really subtle, clever way, drifted the conversation towards these topics. And I was like, that person has put in serious spade work. I just thought it was really clever. And in this, in a world where everybody lives their lives online, there is such opportunity to drift conversations towards a topic that they are interested in, and you've done the background reading on it.
That's really really good advice. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, I really like to listen to the FT briefing. That 10-minute podcast, really, although it doesn't go into extreme detail about the stories that they are or about the news stories that they are telling to you, you are then able to, I mean, I do this anyway, able to go to the FT newspaper and then read more in depth about those stories. And you know that because the FT briefing is highlighting these stories as like the main ones, you know they're the main ones to read.
Exactly.
And then you can kind of like venture off from there. I haven't read the FT Weekend, but the FT podcast does do a weekender version, and they talk about the arts world and restaurants. And although it's kind of more cultural driven, you are able to then see which industries are doing well and which industries aren't doing well. And I think that ties quite nicely in with the whole kind of like broad commercial awareness. So I will have to start reading the FT Weekend.
It's essential.
Click down to the companies and market page. But before I move on, for any of the listeners who are interested in subscribing to the FT newspaper, your university may provide you with a code so you get a free subscription. So definitely look into that before paying for it. So we're venturing now to the end of the episode, and after speaking with you, William, for an hour or so, I can see that you've had or having a fantastic career. You must have complete job satisfaction. But I'd really like to know, what has been the highlight of your working week?
Obviously, I will avoid the obsequious sycophant answer of saying doing this podcast. But the highlight of my working week was I'll take last week because we're pretty early into this one, was working with the Cayman team on a Privy Council filing, whereby we had a very short period of time to turn around a document due to unforeseen circumstances, and we produced an incredibly impressive document in a very, very short space of time. And the patience of the team in Cayman, the incredible insights from the client, working with the council team, it just all gelled really, really well. And it was a really good example of the payback for years of working closely with the team, that there was no crunching gear changes in terms of getting the work done. It was just really, really smooth. And we were, a lot of conference calls, a lot of documents being turned around, lots of client instructions, etc., etc. And when that document was filed with a healthy half hour to spare, that was a really, I was really proud of the team for getting that done.
Oh, that's really nice to hear. So any last or any final words of wisdom that you have to share with student lawyers?
You're making an assumption there have been some preceding this, but no, I mean, I think that it's a long journey. Do not be disheartened by anything that happens in the first 4 or 5 years of your career, to be honest with you, because it took me until I was, I think, 5-6 years post qualification to really feel as if I knew what I was doing. And I used to have this thought that on the day I qualified, somebody would hand me a pamphlet which would have all the answers, and actually this was all a bit of a joke, and suddenly you turn into this amazing lawyer overnight. And you don't. It takes time, and I think if you work with somebody who you really like the cut of their jib, and you like the way they treat people and the way they talk to people and the way they go about their business, get close to those people and really learn from them, and ask questions, ask sensible questions, and it is a really rewarding career. It is a really rewarding career, and it's worth it. It is worth it because when you're sitting at your desk tearing your hair out about what am I doing, everybody has been in that position. So it's not just you.
Thank you very much for sharing that, and thank you ever so much for, spending this hour with us and providing such invaluable advice, talking to us about, your career journey and everything that you've accomplished along the way and everything that you have done and where your career has taken you. It's been really insightful, really interesting and motivating and really inspirational as well. So thank you again for being a guest on the podcast. And I hope that you will come back again one day and talk more about your cases and provide a new bunch of student lawyers with advice.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure, Stephanie. You're a wonderful host.
Thank you. And thank you to all the student lawyers listening to this episode, and we will see you back here again next time. To hear more of the Student Lawyers podcast, hit the subscribe button and leave us a star rating and review. If you would like to join the Student Lawyer as a writer, please email hello@thestudentlawyer.com.